And we're really focused, right, on these like dual use technologies. So technologies that can be sold back into the government, but also into the commercial sphere. And what we really are really passionate about is taking these technologies that are in these labs and having them see the light of day. And what I'm really passionate about specifically is kind of this democratizing access, right? Like we are looking for business people and technical applicants who really want to launch a venture, but maybe don't have an idea or don't know where to start. And so this is kind
Welcome to Bourbon Friday. I'm Eric Lusenegger, the founder of Tenacity and the host. I want to introduce our guest today, Trinity Torres, venture analyst for FedTech. Welcome, Trinity.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
Great. So I guess we should just start off. What is FedTech?
Yeah, so FedTech is a venture builder based out of Washington, D.C. that thrives at this intersection of U.S. entrepreneurship, breakthrough technologies, and mission-driven organizations. So we kind of have four different parts of our business. So we have our startup studios, which I'm involved in, which is all about pairing technology from national labs with entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs and helping them turn those into their next venture. We have internal innovation, which is all about teaching people how to be entrepreneurial. So I have some really great contracts there with the government. We have our Accelerators portfolio, which is all around taking startups in the deep tech space and teaching them how to sell back into the government. So we have a great, huge Army contract where we teach, companies how to sell back into the Army. And then we have our corporate ventures team where we're all about, helping our corporate partners find upcoming technologies and startup companies that they can partner with. So that's a little bit about us, but we kind of work in the deep tech space across the DoD, NASA, DOE, and across federal labs.
Okay, great. So let's go down the rabbit hole a little bit. Let's talk about these programs a little bit more in depth. And you said you're mostly involved in the startup studio, is that right?
Yeah, so I support recruitment for our startup studios. So I'm always looking for kind of technical and business talent who are interested in being a part of our program and launching their next venture.
Okay, and what are the different sort of specific programs? I think you have one that the applications are ending. Unfortunately, I think they end the day that this will come out. The Defense
We're going to
Innovation
extend it by one more move.
Yeah.
We're going to extend it by 1 week. So,
oh, okay, great.
Yeah. So your listeners will hear a little bit earlier than publicly, but we're going to extend it by 1 more week. So when this comes out, you'll have 1 week to apply for our upcoming program, which is our Defense Innovation Accelerator. So that's with Ensign, and that's all about taking technologies from national labs and learning how to launch a venture and sell back into the Department of Defense space. So really, really cool. We really try to find a lot of veterans and former DoD employees for that specific cohort, but anyone can apply. It's going to be huge. I think it'll be about 60 entrepreneurs.
Wow.
So really, yeah, we offer a great opportunity to kind of network and meet people. It's going to be completely virtual. So that will kick off end of May. We have another program launching in the summer, which we'll have a bunch of different labs participating in that, including NASA. So that's a really exciting opportunity. And we actually just closed our inaugural Homeland Security Startup Studio, which is in partnership with the Department of Homeland Security.
Okay, so it seems like there's probably some real challenges here between like getting people to like learn how to sell to the government, and you're actually trying to solve that problem.
Yeah, and we're really focused, right, on these like dual use technologies. So technologies that can be sold back into the government, but also into the commercial sphere. And what we really are really passionate about is taking these technologies that are in these labs and having them see the light of day. And what I'm really passionate about specifically is kind of this democratizing access, right? Like we are looking for business people and technical applicants who really want to launch a venture, but maybe don't have an idea or don't know where to start. And so this is kind of a great path to launching a venture and kind of having our help and our coaching and our mentorship to do so.
Okay. And so I guess what's the application process like for this? I mean, is it pretty arduous, or is it?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. So What I think is really cool is we kind of have an always on approach. So at any point you can go to fedtech.io and we'll have applications open and you can kind of fill it out based on your interest or your availability. And so you do an initial application, you'll get invited to do a video interview, and it's kind of it's those new one-way video interviews. You have a set of questions, you're
Okay.
talking to the camera, and then we'll kind of screen that. And then after that, you'll have a technology matching. So if you get to the next stage, we'll send you a list of the technologies for the upcoming cohort. You can kind of rank it based on what you're interested in or what your background is. And then it's a virtual, as of right now, right? Everything's virtual, a virtual interview. And then that's it. So it's pretty easy, pretty streamlined process, and doesn't really differentiate.
Sure. So I guess, is this like an equity free type situation, or is FedTech taking equity in these companies?
No, we don't take any equity at all, and we don't charge any fee. So completely free. This is why I think it's such a great way for people, if they're interested in entrepreneurship or maybe have had experience before, to kind of dive deep in it, because it's completely free. We never take equity, neither before or after the program.
Okay, great. And so, obviously, we're talking about technology here. So, what are some of the types of patents, technologies that like have that FedTech is sort of lining up with these entrepreneurs?
Yeah, they really range in different verticals, but what we've been seeing is cybersecurity, a lot of AI, autonomous vehicles. So they kind of range depending on the technologies from the lab, but we really focus on that like deep tech space.
Okay. And so, I guess I did talk to you a little bit about this in our previous conversation. Is like, as somebody that's had like multiple founders ask me to join their team or become a co-founder, and I just sort of flatly turn them down as like, well, I'm not really interested in doing what you're doing. Shatter my preconceived notions about like this idea that you have to, like, this is the thing that I have to do, because obviously you're bringing new founders in, or new startups in, people that might not know what they want to do, but maybe have that passion. So tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think what's really cool is we focus on kind of that lean startup model. And so we kind of have two phases of the program, which I think makes us pretty unique. So phase one is you get this tech, you're matched with this technology, you either come in with the team or you're matched with the team. And it's all about figuring out if there's a market for this technology. So it's very customer discovery focused. And then phase two, let's say you're like, okay, we have a market, we know this technology is viable, we want to proceed. Phase two is all about us helping you establish as an early stage company. So we bring in experts, we bring in coaches, we have a founder forum, we'll help you set up a website, a logo, we'll bring in legal advice, and really help you kind of get that foundation to kind of get you set up before you graduate the program. So I do think it's really unique, and we're starting to see, this startup studio model pop up in different
Mm-hmm.
places. But I do really think what makes us unique is kind of our two-phased approach and the connections we have with the labs and the DoD ecosystem.
Okay, great. So, do you have any success stories? I guess we didn't really cover like how long has FedTech been around, but do you have any success stories that really come to mind?
Yeah, so we've been around since 2015, and we've had about, I think, 45 companies launched. And our last cohort, about 50% went on to launch a venture, so about a 50% success rate for our most recent cohorts. And yes, we have a couple start like success stories that come to mind. So out of our most recent one for Defense Innovation Accelerator, there's a team called Candalytics, and they've been killing it since they've graduated our program, which is just crazy to watch because, right, they weren't even a team, and then we like paired them all with these strangers, and they've been in tons of competitions. I think they got a pitch to one of the sharks from Shark Tanks.
Oh,
I know
wow.
they just recently had a demo with the U.S. Coast Guard. So they've been having tons and tons of traction. And then we definitely have companies that are a little bit more established. So DKS, it's Kinetic Solutions, I believe, is one of our like big success stories. And then we have a couple others that are, in contracts or negotiations with other big organizations.
Okay, very cool. So, I mean, we talked about the application process. I think something that I found super interesting about you specifically, because we are in the middle of the pandemic, you were actually hired during all of this. So you've been 100% virtual this
Yeah,
entire
the
time?
whole time. Yeah. Yeah, it was just super interesting, right? To like start at a new company and then kind of build out and also grow with the company. FedTech has just grown so much as a team. So it's been really interesting to kind of, work with people like day to day, but I've never met them in person.
And how much is FedTech growing? I mean, you said they started in 2015.
Yeah, so I think before I joined, which is early last year, they were a team of like 10. And now we're up to like 25. I think we're like bringing two more people on just this week alone. So we just keep growing. I think there's been like 7 people since I've joined, and I joined last summer.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so we just keep like bringing more and more people on. So yeah, we actually have a ton of full-time roles open at the company as well.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I think we covered the most important parts of all of this. Is there anything else you want people to know about FedTech?
Yeah, I think what I would love people to think about is I think this is a really, really like our Startup Studios program is a really great opportunity for people from a variety of skill sets. So we're really looking for anyone who's really passionate about kind of seeing these technologies turn into ventures. So if you're exiting the military, if you are re-entering the workforce, or maybe if you're in the later stage of your career and you really just want to try something different, I would
Sure.
encourage you to check out our program because I think that's what makes us unique is we're really open to all types of experience and knowledge and backgrounds. I think a lot of kind of programs are very focused in who they want or the age bracket or the type of experience, but we've seen all types of people be successful in our program. So I would really encourage anyone who's interested to apply.
Okay, great. So since this is Bourbon Friday, I would be like, it'd be crazy for me not to ask because looking through your LinkedIn profile, explain the Virginia ABC to me because I don't understand that at all because no state I've lived in is that.
Yeah, it was so interesting to have the government like so involved in alcohol, but also be a business. Yeah, so what Eric is mentioning is I interned and then worked there for about a year for Virginia Alcohol and Beverage Control. And if you're not from Virginia, that's our alcohol stores, which is the only place you can buy hard alcohol. And it was the most interesting job I've ever had, Eric, because you're trying to market alcohol, but then there's all these rules because you're still the government, so you have to be super careful. So it was very interesting, but my favorite part of the job honestly was they have this period of time where people will come in with new products
Mhm.
and you're kind of just sitting in a boardroom watching presentations and like taste testing alcohol all day while they try to convince you to like carry you in the stores. And it's the coolest, like as a recent 20, I was like recently 21 when I
Sure.
started, the coolest job you could possibly ever have. So I was like, oh, I can't afford this ever. So yes, please give me a sample of that bourbon. So yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. Yeah, like I said, I knew that existed, but I don't think I've bought anything. I've been out that direction, but I've never been to one of those ABC stores. So great. Well, this was great. Thank you very much. Now, in the next segment, I tried, Trinity, I tried to find some federal patent or lab patent that was used in bourbon. Couldn't do it, probably because bourbon's been around very, very long time. I'm sure there is. Some of these operations are enormous, but I couldn't. So instead, I'm actually going to talk a little bit about like federal regulation. Last week we talked about pure marketing in bourbon and the stuff on the bottle. This week, I'm actually going to talk about things that actually do mean something on the bottle and actually the fact that bourbon has been regulated. It was actually one of the first regulated products in the United States. So I'm going to be talking about that, but I definitely want to thank you very much, Trinity, for coming on the show. And yeah, just thanks.
Thank you for having me. This was really fun.
All right.
One day we'll be able to have bourbon in person together.
I hope so too. And like my plan, hopefully in the future at some point, is just start traveling around the United States and doing these Bourbon Fridays in person
That would be
at
so
different
cool.
co-working space and that kind of thing. So I hope to do that soon. So
Yeah, no, we'd be lucky to have you at FedTech. So
all
we'd
right,
love to host you.
great.
Thanks.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Before we get started, take a second and hit that subscribe button. Done? Great. Last week we talked about all of the things on the bottle that don't really mean anything, marketing, but we know that a lot of what's on the bottle, and indeed what's in the bottle, has to do with laws set up by the US government. And this goes way back. Now, I could talk about whiskey's taxation, the Whiskey Rebellion, but I'll save that for another time. Also, I need to do a lot more research on it. But I want to focus on how we got to what bourbon is legally. And I want to start with the Bottled in Bond Act of 1897, which was created as a reaction to the widespread adulteration of American whiskey. We're talking about people putting iodine, tobacco, and other trash in bourbon. So the act was established to let people know that this is a quality product and they aren't drinking garbage. It was established that bonded products must be aged in a federally bonded warehouse under U.S. government supervision. This is Heaven Hill, Bottled and Bond. You can see under U.S. government supervision. And that has to be done for at least 4 years, and it must be bottled at 100 proof. They also have to be a product of one season, which means either January through June or July through December. It has to be made by one distiller at one distillery. And the bottle must identify where it was distilled, and if different, where it was bottled. And of course, only spirits produced in the United States can be bonded. Then in 1906, whiskey became part of the Pure Food and Drug Act, which was the first significant consumer protection act. Now, it wasn't until 1909 when they actually were able to define what whiskey even was. Many of the rules of what became bourbon we owe to President William Howard Taft, because the debate on what it was and wasn't couldn't be settled. Then in 1935, the Federal Alcohol Administration was created. This eventually became known as the ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. This helped lay out some of the foundations for what would become the legal definition of bourbon. So, what is bourbon then? Well, there's this myth that true bourbon must be made in Kentucky. Nope. Doesn't have to be made there. It has to be made in the U.S., though. I will say that 95% of all bourbon is made in Kentucky. We know to be whiskey, it's got to be from grain, but bourbon has to be at least 51% corn. Both of those, Taft. Then there's the numbers: 80, 125, and 160. 160 is the maximum proof that new make or moonshine can be distilled to. That comes from Taft. 125 is the maximum proof that you can start aging it at. And then 80, like this Jack Daniels here, is the minimum proof to go in the bottle. And typically you only find 80 proof in like mass market bourbons. So Jack Daniels being the biggest whiskey brand, or Tennessee whiskey, which is bourbon, they're at 80 proof. So is the Jim Beam White Label. Many people will tell you that bourbon has to be aged in new charred American oak barrels. That's not entirely correct. It's common, but not entirely correct. They do have to be new, which obviously means they've never been used before. They do need to be charred, and they do need to be oak. But they don't need to be made from American oak. French oak, you bet. Maker's 46 puts 10 French oak staves in their barrels. Japanese Mizunara oak. Angel's Envy played around with that, as is Jefferson's Broken Barrel, and even Buffalo Trace. Most of this was in finishing, But nothing is stopping them from using rare or expensive oak. Of course, most are American oak, specifically white oak, because the supply is plentiful and close by. But does it even need to be a barrel? It doesn't actually. The law says containers. So if you have an oak box, you could age bourbon in it as long as it meets all of the other requirements. So, aged in new charred oak containers. Taft. And so what about aging? Some people will tell you it must be aged 2 years. But that isn't accurate either. There's no minimum time limit. So 5 seconds, 5 months, 5 years, it all can be labeled bourbon. Now, if it is aged 2 years, it doesn't have added coloring, flavoring, or other spirits, it can be labeled as straight bourbon. Bourbon generally can't have those things, but I'm not going to go into that. There's this insanely long esoteric comment argument about this if you want to go searching for it. But I've read it. I don't need to go through it again. The bottle must have an age statement on it, though, if it's less than 4 years. I did find an illegal bottling here recently, not Stumpy's. Stumpy's actually on the back of their bottles has a bunch of information, including char level, barrel proof entry. They do it at 119. And then the age, which is 26 months. They do 26 months, and they use smaller barrels, which actually enhances extraction. So the organization that manages all of this is the Alcohol, Tobacco, Tax and Trade Bureau, or you'll probably hear of it if you're into bourbon, the TTB, which was spun out of the ATF and all this is governed by Title 27 of the U.S. Code of Federal Regulations. It's all unclear when all of these definitions were added. I tried to figure it out, but government. Then, finally, in 1964, bourbon was recognized by Congress as a distinctive product of the United States. This was the first American spirit to be recognized. By doing this, they banned the importation of bourbon from other countries and saved our native spirit. I'll save you the readings of the whereases and the therefores, but go check it out. It's pretty interesting. 50 years later, Congressman John Yarmouth of Louisville noted that it doesn't take an act of Congress to know that Kentucky bourbon is the finest spirit in the nation. And I'll drink to that. I hope you enjoyed this little walk down bourbon's legal history. Let me know what I got wrong in the comments. And let me know what's the craziest thing you know about bourbon history. Finally, I want to thank Trinity from FedTech again for joining us. I'll see you soon for more great drinks and better conversations. Bye-bye.
To stay up to date, follow us on social. We are at Bourbon Fridays on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok. See you next time.